Even if you are in a job that you like and that you think you're comfortable in, always keep an eye on the market and sort of try to understand where things are going and how things are changing, and how you with your passions can add value in different capacities.
And so we kick off part 2 of this episode together with Eva Offermans. She's the founder of a recruitment agency based in New York. The name of the agency is called, guess what? Placement on Purpose. And we talk about the importance of referrals. We talk about the importance of keeping an eye on that market. We talk about how relevant it is to make sure you also stay focused on what it is you really love to do, what you enjoy doing, and what you're good at doing. And hopefully there's also a market need for it. So off we go.
Referrals are the biggest source of successful hires. So and it makes sense, right? We're all human. So if we know each other, and if I tell you I have someone for you who's excellent, I worked with them in another capacity maybe some years ago, but excellent, you would trust that so much more than if you just get a resume without any context or without anyone endorsing them, right? So I always advise people as well to, don't be shy and don't feel, I know this, like, people don't want to come off as desperate is also a thing. And there's a whole discussion around, should you put that green banner on LinkedIn, like that you're looking for a job, or does that look too desperate? And it's sad actually that people look at it as, oh, you're looking for a job, you must be desperate, because that's also definitely not the case. In this round of layoffs, so many people are, and in general, I think it can happen to anyone, but are laid off outside of performance as well, right? So people should not be ashamed, but you were rightly saying, a targeted approach and a human approach is the best one. And look for people who and don't be shy in that, to reach out and to say, I need help. If you've worked with people in the past and they are connected to maybe leaders at companies where you are interested in working for, say, can you refer me? Can you put a good word in for me? Or just say, I have applied, not to make the burden too big on them. If you feel like uncomfortable with asking people to do work for you, say, I have applied. Maybe you can just talk to the hiring manager and make sure that at least they will see my resume. Because if there's a junior recruiter on all those thousands of applications, the resume might not even reach the hiring leader, right? So if you then know someone and you just say, I've applied, there's nothing really that you need to do, but if you could put a good word in and just say that, make sure that they see my resume, that's all. I think those things can be very powerful.
Yeah, which once again, I think leads to the paradox of our times, technology opening up so many options. So if I want to, I can apply for, any kind of job, because everything is kind of like accessible, but in reality, the hallway or the doorway is narrow. It's very narrow nonetheless, and maintain
the personal connection makes the difference. Yeah,
exactly. So in the stage of technology, that's what we're saying. It's kind of like, you've got the platform, but it's not going to lead you very far. It may lead you further if you use the platforms as a networking opportunity rather than as a job application opportunity, because it first needs to start. Otherwise, you're just a name in the midst of, like, if you're saying there were 2,000 applicants for a role.
Yeah.
That
also in that, from that perspective, it also doesn't really help the company be more efficient, right? Because imagine, what to do with 2,000 applications. So sometimes really less is more as well. That's why I think my job as a sort of a headhunter or executive search consultant external can really help, because people sometimes have the idea of, well, we can attract a lot of people, so we don't need that. Yeah, I'm sure you can. But if you have 2,000 applications, how efficient are you going to be to filter out the right ones, right? So the value of people like me is also to do all that work for you, to talk to people, and then to send you a short list of 5 really good ones who are motivated to work for you, who maybe live near your office if you have a work policy that requires that. Sometimes less is more. So technology opens up indeed the options, but having 2,000 applications for one job is not helping anyone. So sometimes, yes, you can use the technology, and then you need the human touch as well.
Yeah, you still need that conduit, let's say, that is able to make the connections amongst humans, from humans to humans. And I also think that conduit is equally important for the candidate to better interpret the culture of a company. Because if I've been now, and I've lost count on how many separate companies, also due to mergers, acquisitions, etc. But at the end of the day, whatever you see on, their values, their mission statement, they're very, very similar one with the other. So it also requires an incredible ability to read through once again. And I think you guys have an important role to play as intermediates, probably even more so than talent acquisition people within companies, but really the external eye, which, you can really read between cultural, let's say, taglines that are fashionable, and really say, no, but they're saying this, but actually they are that. They're saying they're very open and transparent, but actually they're very conservative and traditional. And therefore, it's only once you know that you can better find that ideal, profile. Because the other big risk is, people jumping from one job to the next, just realizing that it was anyway a mistake,
Absolutely. I think that's very true. And also external people can tell you if you're off better than internal people, because we talk to so many people in other companies as well and how they are organized. So sometimes we can sort of coach on maybe a better way of organizing your team based on what we see in the market, but also they might have requirements for a job and the salary might not be aligned at all, because maybe that was done by a compensation team 10 years ago and the skill set has become much more in demand or something like that. And so external recruiters can often really help as consultants, because they see so much and they talk to so many different people, because that's always the risk of being in a company, right? That you don't see anything else anymore, that you're sort of in a tunnel vision and you think that everything that happens inside is what the world is. So external advice and consultancy can be very helpful there as well. Yeah.
And as you were talking, I was kind of like, you were mentioning a couple of things that lead me to another question, like on location.
Yeah.
I'm wondering post-COVID, and once again, you've got these trends, all of a sudden, everybody working from home, and now kind of like this backlash. In one of the episodes, one of my guests, Tim, he was saying, there is a backlash of conservatism and traditionalism, people wanting to go, forcing people to go back to the office, etc. What are you seeing out there? What are people, how important is that, this flex way of working?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising to me. I thought that COVID would create a bigger transformation with work from anywhere. And there were initial signs where a few large companies like Spotify was one of the first to say we implement the work from anywhere policy. Right. And I thought, wow, that could make also this whole recruiting function, talent acquisition discipline so much more interesting, because then you can get your talent from anywhere. It also is complex, of course, right? Because payroll and different cost of living in different places. And I understand that there's a lot of challenges to that too. But I had expected it to shift more, because basically COVID has proven, I think the data shows that companies were not worse off with people working from home, right? People were still productive. And there was that, of course, there's that fear of leaders who've always done it a certain way, and who, especially the ones that may be a bit less trusting and a bit more micromanaging, they like to see people doing their jobs versus just focusing on the output and the delivery. So that discomfort of if I don't see you, I'm not sure what you're doing. I thought that COVID has actually disproven that, because companies were still doing well and people turned out to be productive. And then there's maybe sometimes even more productive, because you don't have to commute for hours, you're not in traffic, and you can already start maybe at 7 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. if you don't have to do that commute, or and it makes people in certain situations with small kids, for example, more flexible to take care of that, while they can then also do their work better, because once the kids are to bed, whatever, they could start. So it makes everything more flexible. Work-life balance is better. I think people were more productive. So I expected a shift. It's not really shifting from what I'm seeing now. So there were some early signs, and then it went back. And now in this market, I mean, the percentage of jobs posted that are fully remote is almost zero. It's like it's really small. So people want people back close to an office. What you do see sometimes is that they say, well, we're open to any location where we have an office. So that makes it a bit more flexible, but fully remote is really not a thing anymore. And now what I see, because the market is shifting so in the way that because there was over hiring in certain industries during COVID, and now they are letting people go, that some companies are even sort of using it to let people leave. Like, for example, on the West Coast in very expensive places, or here in New York, where people have moved away to live a bit more in an affordable place, that they require them to come back to this super expensive city, hoping that they will leave so that they don't have to do another round of layoffs. So it's almost used as a tool to get rid of people. It sounds very disrespectful, but yeah. So and that has to do with the dynamic again, with the demand and supply. Right now, the companies are back in the driver's seat in certain industries. I mean, it's still the labor market is still not really bad. I mean, unemployment is still really low. But now the industries that are doing well are more government and education and healthcare and hospitality, and the corporates, the tech companies, and they are not doing well. So so it's still the labor market in general is still not so bad, but in certain industries it's looking really gloomy for the talent out there, and especially in those places. People would require them to come back to the office, because they can afford to do that.
They can, and it's also, there was productivity, but I think another thing popped up, which is the sense of belonging, anyway, the sense of, how do you maintain the human bond, and if everybody is kind of like a random variable out there in an ecosystem, it for some people was also very difficult to stay connected with their colleagues and with what was going on, and it's true that I have this conversation face to face, it would be very different than on a Zoom call or stuff like that. And imagine when your colleagues, that does make that it helps. So it's as always, it's like, where do we find that right middle ground?
That's true. I was never very black and white and, oh yes, everyone should be fully remote. I can see the advantages of it. But I also see the advantages of being in an office and just having that chit chat around the water cooler or the coffee machine, right? That you won't have ever if you just do Zoom meetings all day. So you don't get to know people, and for culture and for belonging and for loyalty, maybe, and feeling you're part of a community that matters to you. Absolutely. And certain jobs also there's a need for them for actual presence. So in my opinion, the hybrid sort of flexible model would be the ideal in most cases.
I agree. Let's see how that's going to play out. But I do think that's going to be more and more of that, hopefully, and less of like the two extremes, completely working from home, or you have to be back to the office. Which actually, I was thinking then of another topic, because you were talking about the labor market, and in my idea of this world of work, it's a bit like moving away from a supply and demand. Bear with me a second, like concept, because that's very much of goods, isn't it? And the human as a resource, right? The supply, the demand, and I'm kind of thinking, if we continue to think that way, supply and demand, I sense that we're always going to be running behind the market dynamics, right? So and I think that can be very tiring for people after a while. It's forget the ones who are, the young professionals starting in their jobs and who are probably already disillusioned. I don't know. I'd like to hear your view actually on that too. How do you see the younger generation, the new generation, when they're hitting the job market? What's their enthusiasm and what are they really expecting? But if you leave them aside for a second, you look into the trajectory of a career of 30, 40 or whatever years, the sense of supply and demand, one is always thinking, okay, well, what's going to be the next one where what I offer is going to be in demand for, as opposed to, because I wonder if that mentality is really helping us, as opposed to finding opportunities where there may not be a demand yet, right? But where there is a need. So, and a need that's not yet manifested as a need. So, for example, I don't know, you look into the trends, sustainability, the fossil fuels, climate change, you name it, you got it, right? Technology, etc. There are lots of things that are popping up that we would have never expected it to be happening in the past. So I always encourage people to also think beyond just the market and also think, hey, what do you have to offer? And if you were a company, well, how would you position that offering vis-a-vis, potential buyers? But because, anyway, I'm on a.
Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying, because indeed it sounds like people are commodities, and I truly believe also in my heart that people should do what they love to do and not just look at what is out there, what is needed, and let me get a degree in that particular field so that I can get a job. I do think that's a bit depressing almost, because that would mean that nobody could follow their passion anymore. But on the other hand, there's also reality. So when I talk about demand and supply, it's like the demand for people and organizations in the US now in certain industries is low, because there was overhiring during COVID and after. And now there's just, for people in general, people are being let go. So if the demand is low, it's like we touched on earlier, it's very hard to say, oh, let me figure out my passion and see if maybe, someone is gonna be interested in what I have to offer, because there's more urgency, right? So well, when the demand was high, like a year or two ago, people could do that, and I think there was much more room for, let me really seek out what I want to do, and then and they had the option to do that. So you have to kind of be realistic, I think, and a little bit of a dreamer at the same time. I love to believe that people should always dream and follow their hearts in a way, and their passions. And indeed also times change, so if all aligns it well, and then maybe there's going to be opportunity for people who do that. And I think when you love what you do, you will be doing better, you thrive. It's all true. But then there is a job market, and you have to sort of be realistic as well as what your options are, right?
Yeah. It's true. And it's not a conversation, let's say, that one would have in the moment of need and crisis, but it's a conversation that one would have when you talk about career development in the long term for people,
Absolutely.
That's the difference. But usually people reach out to individuals like yourself or to me when it's too late, or when it's a crisis moment. But it's more of how does one place themselves on purpose? If we go back to that, how do you purposefully design your trajectory? What doesn't mean you know exactly what's going to happen after 3 years, 4 years. That's impossible, right? Unless you've got a sphere, or you're a magician. But it's more on this purposeful placement of your life. It's like purposeful placement of your talents, your skills. How do you build those skills that you need to build so that it becomes a natural way for you to go, as opposed to scrambling and kind of figuring it out when it is in moments of crisis, because that usually doesn't work that way,
Absolutely true. Yeah, I think and I always encourage people to constantly be searching or keep a tab on what you like, what you enjoy. And if you cannot do those things in a job that you can make a living with, make sure you cultivate hobbies and your passions outside of work, right? And listen to podcasts and learn up on things. And there's so many ways in which you can still develop yourself in the fields of your interests and follow your passions outside of work. And I think it's super important. And then always, as you referred to as well, even if you are in a job that you like and that you think you're comfortable in, always keep an eye on the market and sort of try to understand where things are going and how things are changing, and how you with your passions can add value in different capacities as well. And keep talking to others and to people in other organizations, and because you're right, sometimes people totally lose track of that, and they're in companies for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're on the job market and they're completely lost. They haven't networked, they don't know how to talk about their skills, they don't have resumes, they don't have LinkedIn profiles, but also they really sometimes lost. Sometimes it leads to identity crisis, right? Like they were something in that company and everyone knew them there, and they sort of became lazy and okay, so that's my identity. And then they're really lost. So yeah, you always, in my opinion, it's good for every individual to constantly, actively be on that journey of how you can continue to develop yourself and follow your passions. And if it's something where you cannot immediately in this moment make a living with, you have to be realistic and see, okay, what can I do for a living, and how can I then also cultivate my other passions.
Absolutely. Very precious words, what you're saying. And especially the sense of people identifying themselves with their job, especially the more senior they become, they think they are that job description or that business card. Yeah. And this is true when they're either asked to leave, because everybody will be asked to leave at some stage in their lives. This is just the natural way of the world of work nowadays. It's going to be more and more like that. Or when you retire, this happens all the time when people, they all of a sudden, they have to move on, they retire, and then they feel that their life is all of a sudden empty because they've identified themselves so fully into that job, which may have been fantastic, amazing fulfillment, but that's not who we are only,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there was something else that when we were talking last time, that if you don't mind, very quickly, I'd like to touch upon. When we were first talking, you had mentioned that your own world of work, how that has changed since when we first met and worked together. And how you pivoted from different jobs, but then you realized that once you were out, it was really difficult for you to go back in and to feel that going back into corporate was the right place for you. I was kind of curious to hear your own experience in your own world of work, how that changed, and how you can't kind of go back to something that you leave behind. But
Yeah. For me, it feels that way, because what I realized when I started to work for myself, and I had really very nice experiences in corporate as well. And I worked for large organizations, and I worked for a startup, and again, different industries, different places. Some great bosses, some not so great, right? Like just a general thing that everyone goes through. But I think what I mostly concluded when I started for myself was that, wow, I have so much time left because generally in organizations, you do a lot for other people or for the optics or for political reasons, like you need to show up in a certain meeting, and meetings are not always very efficient. I remember in certain corporate settings where, you are in these weekly or monthly meetings, and in the end, there's no real takeaways or there's no real accountability assigned. So the next time you meet, you're at the exact same place where you were before. And so I realized, wow, now I work for myself. I don't have a boss. I don't have to show my face in meetings. And now I can only focus on either what I love doing, what helps others, or what makes me money, or ideally the three combined. And I found I have so much time left, which was amazing. So I kind of realized, though, again, I had very valuable experiences in corporate as well. And I'm very grateful to a lot of the teachers on the way, because I could never have started my own thing right from college, right? After, like as a fresh grad, I needed that foundation of corporate learnings and see how organizations work. So but it would be very hard to go back into sort of a rigid environment where politics play a big role. So because I would be constantly asking myself, what am I doing here, right? A lot is happening in my view in organizations that is not directly positively impacting anything. There's often a lot of talk, and so that would be hard for me to go back to, because now I'm used to, even though sometimes, I mean, there's good things about that too, and sometimes it's lonely to work just for yourself, right? And it would be nice to sort of bounce ideas off of someone, and I miss that. I miss sometimes coaching and leading teams as well, that what I sort of did towards the end of my career, because I enjoyed that too. But yeah, the fact that what they say, this 20-80 rule, where 20% of the time you spend on something results in it, like covers 80% of the output. Like if you're more targeted and you focus on exactly what you want to focus on, you have a much better outcome than if you just all over the place and you do things for reasons that might not be yours or benefiting your business directly. So that I think would be hard for me to go back to sort of a highly political environment. Mm-hmm. I could still imagine working like maybe with a smaller company with like a great mission, because I do like the idea of building something together with a community of sort of like-minded people, and where you can still learn from others and build something meaningful. But I think I wouldn't easily be able to go back into like a super large organization, very hierarchical, with many layers, with many cooks in the kitchen, with lots of politics. That would be hard for me, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, it would be hard for me too. I think once you've explored different spaces into, once again, you imagine the world of work as different landscapes that you can go through and explore, then going back to, well, some people love it and they do go back to it for sure. Yeah. But I smiled as you were talking, because I was thinking to myself, we were just talking about productivity and about, how companies think or have seen that people can be equally productive from working from home. Actually, the time we spend on unproductive activities in companies, it is just mind-boggling.
It is, right? Yeah.
I've always said to myself, we are way too highly paid to spend time in meetings and influencing, when ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't really make much of a difference. You're just, that becomes your job, your activity, your task. And that's, at least, when the clock starts ticking, for me, I'd rather spend my time, differently than playing the status and the political influencer. I'd rather be the normal influencer, if that makes sense.
And really try to make an impact. I mean, something meaningful. And if that is just talking to one person, for me, it can be talking to one person, maybe even if I can't find them a job right away, but making them feel better a little bit, or give them some advice that is useful to them. That still, even if it's one person, would be more satisfying and impactful, I think, than sitting in an hour meeting where there's no outcome and no takeaways with 20 other people, right?
Very true. Last question, my dear Eva. So, part of the WOW, the World of Work podcast, of course, the question about, what's wowing you at the moment, what's giving you that kick, what's giving you that energy. If there's something you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think people keep wowing me, and also what wows me too, this conversation was very, very inspirational, actually, which you said also about that people can have different career paths and do different things, and the potential of humans to learn and to do different things and to find new passions. I think it's amazing, and that keeps wowing me in talking to individuals who are, for example, transitioning in their careers, and even I see it for myself. I know you are someone like that as well, who's also very active in music and a very creative person, and I find that in myself too when I tap into something new. Now I'm doing something completely different for the time being, which is I'm writing a book, and I find so much to that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, but it's even without thinking about the outcome, I think enjoying the journey, right? It taps into a completely different side of me. It's my creative brain, which is very different than what I usually tap into, and I think that keeps showing me that we keep evolving. And there's so much potential behind every human being.
Oh, wow, that's super cool. Hey, next time it's going to be about your book. Well, here we are. This is the end of this episode, and I actually think that the next time is going to be about Eva's greatest job ever, the most purposeful job ever. She became mommy of beautiful baby Leo. This happened on May 6th. Right between the moment of the recording and the moment of the publishing of this podcast. Well, this is what the wow is also about. You come in as a speaker and you walk out as a mom. Isn't that fantastic? Anyway, wishing you guys all the best, and especially all the best and lots of love, lots of happiness to Eva and baby Leo. Take good care.